This is the story of Ethan Cole and his wife Rachel Cole. They had been the kind of couple that other people described as solid, the word chosen. Not as a compliment, but as a quiet observation. The way you might describe a house that has good bones but needs work. Ethan had loved Rachel the way he loved most things. Steadily, without announcement, with the particular faith of a man who believed that consistency was its own form of devotion. Rachel had loved Ethan too in the beginning, and perhaps for longer than she later admitted to herself. But she had always carried a restlessness she couldn't quite name, a hunger that sat just beneath her contentment and occasionally surfaced in the middle of ordinary evenings, while Ethan read beside her and the house settled into its nighttime sounds. Their marriage was not unhappy. That was what made it so hard to explain, afterward to others and to herself. The story that follows is about what happens when a life that looks like enough quietly stops feeling like it, and what two people do with the wreckage of that distance. The Coles had lived in the same house on Mercer Street for 6 years, long enough that the neighborhood had begun to feel like an extension of themselves. The elm tree in the front yard that dropped branches in every storm, the neighbor across the street who left his Christmas lights up until March. The particular creak of the third porch step that Ethan had been meaning to fix since the year Lily was born. Lily was 5 now. She was the best thing, Ethan thought, that they had made together without argument. A child who had arrived with such complete and uncomplicated certainty that it had felt, for a while, like proof that the marriage was built on something real. She had Rachel's dark eyes and Ethan's habit of going quiet when she was working something out in her mind. And she was, in the private language of Ethan's interior life, the one thing he held without reservation. Rachel was 33 that year. She had gone back to work part-time at the design firm downtown after Lily started preschool, and the return had done something to her that Ethan noticed without fully understanding. She came home brighter, more animated, full of opinions about projects and colleagues, and the particular dynamics of a workplace that had continued without her. He was glad for it. He told her so. But there was something in the brightness that didn't quite include him the way a lamp illuminates a room without caring which room it's in. Ethan worked in civil engineering for the county, a job that was unglamorous in the way that necessary things often are. He liked the precision of it, the satisfaction of problems that had correct answers. He was not an unfeeling man. Colleagues who knew him described him as thoughtful, steady, a good listener, but he had a particular difficulty with the unstructured emotional conversations that Rachel sometimes tried to initiate. Not because he didn't care, because he never quite knew where to put himself inside them. On a Tuesday in October, ordinary, overcast, the kind of day that doesn't announce itself, they ate dinner together at the kitchen table while Lily narrated an elaborate dispute between two of her stuffed animals. Rachel had made pasta. Ethan had opened wine. The domestic machinery of their life ran smoothly, the way it always did. And from the outside there was nothing to see. But Ethan noticed, between Lily's monologue and Rachel's patient responses, that Rachel didn't look at him once during the meal. Not in an angry way, not in the deliberate, charged way of someone who's choosing not to look. Just not at him. The way you stop seeing furniture after a while. It was the kind of thing that might mean nothing. It was the kind of thing that stays with you anyway. After Lily was in bed, Rachel took her wine to the couch and opened her laptop, and Ethan washed the dishes because he always washed the dishes. And the silence between them was comfortable in the way that silences become comfortable when you've stopped expecting them to be filled. "Good day?" he asked from the sink. A pause. "We got the Harlow account. Marcus presented it." "That's good." "Yeah." He dried his hands. He came and sat in the armchair across from her, not beside her, a small habitual thing he'd never examined. She was reading something on her screen, the light of it catching the edge of her face. She was still, he thought, the most beautiful person he had ever spent sustained time with. And he still thought it the way you think things that are simply true, without ceremony. "You seem a little far away," he said. She looked up. There was a pause before her expression arranged itself into something that was not quite a smile, but close to it. "Just tired," she said. "Okay." He picked up his book. She returned to her screen. The lamp between them made a warm circle on the ceiling, and outside the elm tree moved in the wind, and the house made its sounds, and the evening closed around them like a parenthesis, around a sentence that had, somewhere in its middle, lost its meaning. He did not know that yet. He thought they were fine. His name was Daniel Marsh. Ethan would not learn this for another 4 months, but Daniel had already been present in Rachel's life for longer than that. As senior creative director at the firm, recently separated from his own wife, the kind of man who asked follow-up questions and remembered small details and made the person he was talking to feel as though they were the most interesting thing in his immediate world. Rachel did not fall for him all at once. She would have told you that herself, and she would have been telling the truth. It happened the way water finds its way through stone, not dramatically, but persistently, in the smallest possible increments, through channels of ordinary conversation and shared work and the particular intimacy of being seen by someone new. She started staying later on Thursdays. She mentioned Daniel once, twice, 3 times in the way you mention a colleague. Neutral and incidental, the way you build familiarity in plain sight. Ethan registered the name the way he registered most names, filed and forgotten. He was deep in a project for the county, a drainage system redesign that had been trouble for months, and he came home tired and present in a way that was really a form of absence there, but preoccupied, attentive to Lily, routine with Rachel, not noticing what he was not noticing. In February, on a night when Lily was at Rachel's mother's and the house was quiet in the way it rarely was, Rachel made a specific effort. She cooked something more elaborate than usual, opened a bottle of the Bordeaux they'd been saving for nothing in particular, put on music in the kitchen. Ethan came home to it and felt something loosen in his chest, a warmth, a gratitude. He hugged her from behind at the counter, and she leaned into him for a moment before turning, and they ate together and talked, and it was close to what it used to be. "I miss us sometimes," she said, not quite looking at him. Her wine glass was halfway to her mouth. He wasn't sure what to do with the tense. "We're right here," he said. She smiled, but it didn't reach. "Yeah," she said, "we are." He understood in the way he understood things slowly. Afterward, that she had been trying to tell him something, and that he had answered the surface of it instead of the underneath, and that the underneath was what mattered. He just didn't know how to reach it. He'd never been sure where the entrance was. The conversation moved elsewhere. He told her about the drainage project. She asked the right questions. Later they washed up together and she laughed at something he said, and he went to bed thinking that it had been a good evening, and fell asleep feeling almost content. He did not see her lie awake beside him, looking at the ceiling with an expression he had not been invited to. There was a night in March when Ethan came home late, site visit overrun, bad traffic, and found Rachel on the back porch, phone in hand, laughing quietly at something on the screen. She looked up when the door opened and the laughter stopped. Not with guilt exactly, but with the slight recomposure of someone who has been somewhere private. "Hey," she said. "Hey, there's food in the oven. I wasn't sure when you'd be back." "Sorry." It ran long. She nodded and looked back at her phone, and he went inside and ate reheated pasta standing at the counter, and the back porch light made a yellow rectangle on the kitchen floor, and he stood in that light for a moment without knowing why. It was around this time that a strange thing happened. Ethan was talking to Rachel one Saturday morning, a low-stakes conversation about whether they needed to replace the water heater. The sort of conversation that is really about being married and having shared problems. When Rachel paused mid-sentence, she looked at him differently for just a moment, and then she looked slightly past him, with an expression he couldn't read, as if she had become aware of something peripheral. "What?" he said. "Nothing. I just..." She stopped, shook her head slowly. "I don't know. I feel like sometimes I'm watching us from outside." A pause. A strange, small exhale. "I don't know. Maybe, like this story, or subscribe or something." He stared at her. "What does that mean?" She blinked. The expression dissolved. "Nothing," she said. "Forget it. The water heater. We should call someone Monday." And just like that, they were back standing in the kitchen talking about the water heater, the ordinary weight of the morning resuming its hold. But the moment sat at the back of Ethan's mind for days, unclassified, like a word he couldn't define, but felt he should know. What he was beginning to understand, without language for it yet, was that Rachel was not unhappy in the way that unhappy people announce themselves. She was unhappy the way a building settles invisibly, incrementally, until one day a wall is no longer straight and you wonder how long it's been that way. It was a Wednesday in April when he found out. He hadn't been looking. This was the thing he would return to. Later, the absence of suspicion, the clean and terrible innocence of how it happened. He had picked up her phone from the coffee table to check the time because his watch had stopped, and the screen woke as he lifted it. And the message was there, unhidden, because she hadn't expected him home for another hour. I can't stop thinking about last night. You? The name above it was Daniel M. Ethan stood there. He did not feel what he might have expected to feel. There was no surge, no heat. There was instead a very particular stillness, the kind that precedes the full arrival of something large. And underneath this stillness there was a sound like everything he had believed about his life making a small, quiet correction. He put the phone back on the coffee table. He went to the kitchen. He poured a glass of water and stood at the sink and drank it slowly and looked out the window at the yard where Lily's tricycle sat tilted against the fence. When Rachel came home an hour later, Lily was in her room with a puzzle, and Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table with both hands flat on the surface. He heard the door, heard her keys, heard her footsteps. She came into the kitchen and stopped. She looked at him. He looked at him. He said, "Who is Daniel?" No accusation in his voice. No elevation in his voice. No elevation, just the question, placed between them like an object. She didn't say what or who. She did not deflect. She set her bag on the counter, and in that gesture, the careful, deliberate placement of it, he understood that some part of her had been waiting for this, had perhaps even needed it. "He's someone from work," she said. "Then it's more than that." "I know." She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. Outside, a car passed. The refrigerator hummed. "How long?" he asked. "Since December. 4 months." He counted them silently. December, January, February, the month she had cooked the elaborate dinner, leaned into him at the counter, said, "I miss us sometimes." He understood now what that evening had been. Not an attempt to save something, exactly, but a kind of testing of herself, maybe, or of him, or of whether the life she had was worth what she was risking. "Are you in love with him?" he asked. The question cost him something, but he asked it cleanly. Rachel looked at her hands. "I think I might be." A pause. "I'm sorry. I know that's the worst thing I could say." "It's honest," he said. "I'd rather have that." She looked up, and there was something in her expression that surprised him. Not relief exactly, but the particular exhaustion of someone who has been carrying a thing for too long. He recognized it and felt, despite everything, the involuntary pull of knowing her as well as he did. "I didn't plan this," she said. "I know that doesn't mean anything." "It means something," he said. "It just doesn't change anything." She talked for a while then. She talked about feeling invisible. Not because of anything he had done, she was careful to say, but because of something between them, something that had slowly stopped being able to nourish her. She talked about Daniel, the way people talk about things that have answered a question they didn't know they were asking. She was not cruel. She did not make Ethan the villain. If anything, she was almost too generous with him, which had its own particular sting, the implication that he was blameless in a story he was losing. He listened. He had always been good at listening. When she finished, the kitchen was very quiet. He looked at her, really looked. The way you look at something you know you are seeing for the last time in a particular way, and said, "I think you should go stay somewhere else for a while we figure out what we're doing." "Ethan, I'm not angry," he said. And he meant it, or most of it. "I just need some time with Lily, and I need to be in this house without." He stopped. "I just need some time." She nodded slowly. She left that night to her mother's. She took 2 bags. Lily had been told Mommy was helping Grandma with something and had accepted this with the magnificent equanimity of children who do not yet know what questions to ask. Ethan sat in the kitchen alone for a long time after the sound of her car faded. He did not cry, not that night. He thought instead about the water heater, which they had never called anyone about, and he thought this was probably something he would have to handle himself now. In the months that followed, Rachel Cole became Rachel Marsh. The divorce was not contested. Rachel asked for shared custody initially, but as the arrangement took shape as the practical architecture of separated parenting made itself known, week by week, she began accommodating herself to less time than she'd proposed. There were the travel requirements of her new life. Daniel's apartment was in the city, further from Lily's school, and Rachel's hours at the firm had expanded alongside her relationship. She told herself she was doing what was right for Lily's stability. She told herself Ethan was the better daily parent, which was true. She rearranged these truths into something she could live with. Ethan was awarded primary custody without drama. He and Lily continued in the house on Mercer Street. He fixed the third porch step. He still didn't fix the water heater until it failed entirely in November, and then he replaced it with a model that turned out to be quieter than the old one. He learned how to be a single parent with the same methodical patience he brought to engineering problems. Not because he was a machine, but because Lily needed the consistency and he was not going to be the second parent she lost. He cried eventually. Once badly in the shower at 2 in the morning when the grief found him without warning and made its full claim. Other times in smaller ways, in the car after school pickup when a particular song came on, in the grocery store when he saw a wine they used to drink. He did not catastrophize. He did not renovate his personality. He went to therapy, a practical, unflashy therapist named Dr. Warren, who said things like that. Sounds like a reasonable way to feel. And what do you need right now? And Ethan found this more useful than he would have predicted. He started running again, something he'd abandoned years earlier. He ran in the mornings before Lily woke, the neighborhood still gray and quiet, and these were the hours when he most felt the difference between the life he'd had and the one he was making. Rachel, meanwhile, was discovering the texture of what she'd chosen. The marriage to Daniel was immediate, almost emphatic, as though speed would settle the question of whether it was right. Daniel was attentive in the way he'd always been curious, expressive, good at the particular kind of seeing that Rachel had needed, but he was also, she was finding, someone whose attention had always required novelty to sustain itself. He was generous and intermittently distant. He could go from intense presence to preoccupied absence in the span of a day, and Rachel would find herself doing small things, being brighter, being interesting, finding better stories to recapture him. She recognized this, somewhere below conscious thought. She did not admit it. She told friends that she had never been happier. She meant it when she said it, in the same way you mean it when you say you're fine with enough conviction to make it true for the length of the conversation. She posted on social media occasionally, carefully photographs from restaurants, from weekends away, from their apartment that had the high ceilings she'd always wanted. She thought about Lily often. She called 3 times a week. Lily was warm and easy on the phone, chatting about school and her stuffed animals and the new tricycle Ethan had gotten her, a bigger one, red, for the driveway. Rachel held her phone and listened and felt the particular ache of a distance she had chosen without fully accounting for. She did not call Ethan much. When she did, he was civil, even pleasant, which was, perversely, harder to absorb than anger would have been. Anger would have told her where she stood. This told her nothing. It told her he had moved on to a country she no longer had a map for. The turning point came on a Tuesday in June, 14 months after she'd left, when she sat alone in the apartment because Daniel was traveling and a dinner with friends had been canceled, and she found herself watching television she wasn't watching, with a glass of wine she'd poured because the silence needed something in it. She picked up her phone. She looked at Ethan's name in her contacts for a long time. She thought about Lily's recital, coming up Friday. She'd said she would try to come. She thought about a number of other things, financial things, uncomfortable things, Daniel's spending and their shared accounts, and a conversation they'd had last week that had left her feeling, for the first time, genuinely uncertain about the architecture of her new life. She put the phone down. She picked it up again. She typed, "We need to talk." It's urgent. Sent it before she could think too clearly about what she was doing. The response came 11 minutes later. Maybe another time. I'm at Lily's recital. She's about to go on. She's been practicing the part with the ribbon for 2 weeks. You'd be proud of her. Rachel read it 3 times. She sat very still on the couch of the apartment she shared with Daniel, who was in Portland for a conference, and she read Ethan's message 3 times with the careful attention of someone looking for a subtext that was not there. There was nothing in it that was unkind, nothing pointed, just information. A father at a recital. A ribbon, 2 weeks of practicing. You'd be proud of her. Not, she asked where you were. Not, she misses you. Not, I told her you couldn't make it. Just, you'd be proud. The door he had left open was very small, and she understood, reading it for the 3rd time, that this was not cruelty. This was simply what life looked like when someone had found the right distance. She texted back, "How is she? Is she nervous?" He replied 20 minutes later, which meant the recital had started, had perhaps even ended. She forgot one part and improvised. Audience loved it. She's getting cake with her class now. Her teacher said she's really blossomed this semester. And then, after a moment, I'll have her call you tonight when she's home. That was the whole conversation. She called him the following evening, from the kitchen, while Daniel was in the other room. She had told herself she was calling to talk about Lily's summer schedule, which was true. And she had told herself she might also say the other things, which she was less certain about. He answered on the 2nd ring. "Hey!" His voice was ordinary, unhurried. "Hey, do you have a minute?" "Yeah." "Lily's in the bath. Go ahead." She talked about the summer schedule. He had thoughts about it, reasonable ones, practical, and they worked it out in 10 minutes with less friction than she'd expected. He was good at this, she realized, at keeping the necessary machinery of co-parenting operational without making it carry more weight than it needed to. "Okay," she said when they'd covered it. Good, he said. A pause. She had planned, vaguely, to say, and there was something else. But now, in the actual moment, she found she didn't know how to construct the sentence. The thing she had wanted to discuss when she texted 2 days ago, the money thing, the fear that was beginning to take shape around her current life, the impulse that had arrived with "we need to talk" sat just outside her reach. "How are you?" she asked instead. It was insufficient. It was honest. There was a brief pause on his end. Not an uncomfortable one, just the pause of someone who is deciding how much truth is appropriate to put in an answer. "I'm good," he said. "I mean that." She believed him. That was the thing. She believed him completely, and the belief sat in her chest like something hard and small. Not because she wanted him to be struggling, she didn't. She had never wished that on him, but because his being good made the entire topography of what had happened suddenly, undeniably legible. He had not needed her to complete him. He had needed her to want to stay. She had not stayed, and he had, in the intervening year, done the quiet and necessary work of becoming someone who could stand in his own life without looking at the door. "That's good," she said. She meant that too. "Rachel." His voice was gentle. "Careful. What did you want to talk to me about when you texted?" The question was direct without being aggressive. It was, she thought, exactly how Ethan asked things, without theater, without the performance of not asking. She looked at the counter. She looked at the window above the sink, the city lights beyond it, the apartment she'd wanted so much. "Nothing pressing," she said. I wanted to check in, I think." A short pause. "Okay," he said. And in the okay, there was no reproach, no satisfaction, no closing of a gate. There was simply the acknowledgement of what she'd said and the quiet understanding of what she hadn't. "I'll put Lily on when she's out of the bath," he said. "Okay. Thank you. Take care of yourself." "You too." The line didn't go dead dramatically. She heard him move away from the phone, heard the familiar ambient sounds of the house on Mercer Street, Lily's voice in the background, a door, water. And then the call ended. She stood in the kitchen for a long time without moving. In the other room, she could hear Daniel on a phone call of his own, his work voice, animated, fully present for whoever was on the other end. She listened to it without listening to the words. She set her phone face down on the counter, beside the coffee maker that had been a wedding gift she'd chosen. When Lily called 15 minutes later, Rachel sat on the couch and listened to a detailed account of the recital, the ribbon, the part she'd forgotten, the way her teacher had put extra frosting on her slice of cake. And she said all the right things and meant them and laughed in the right places and asked about the ribbon. I kept going, Lily said, with the serene confidence of someone reporting an uncomplicated fact. When I forgot, I just kept going and made up the next part. That's exactly right, Rachel said. Her voice was steady. That's exactly what you do. After they hung up, she sat in the quiet for a while, not thinking exactly, more like listening to the shape of a silence she had made. There was nothing dramatic waiting on the other side of it. No revelation, no absolution, just the slow and ordinary work of a life continuing hers, and his and Lily's between them, each with its own weight to carry forward. She got up eventually. She refilled her wine. She stood at the window and looked at the lights. The city moved below, indifferent and luminous, and she stood there until Daniel's voice in the other room wound down and the apartment went quiet and the night became the night.